Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm gonna be chatting for a little bit about labels and more specifically how they impact me personally and how we as a society think about labels. And my hope is that by the end of this video you will think a little bit differently about labels and how they impact your own life, how they impact the lives of those around you. So let's get started. So first off, I just want to say that labels have been a part of my life literally since the moment that I was born, because I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy at about, I think, 2.5. But the cerebral palsy itself happened likely during my birth or shortly after. So that has been a part of who I am from the moment I was born. And I haven't really talked to my parents too much about this, but I imagine that when I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, that it gave them answers to some questions that they had, because I know that I didn't develop um, properly. I didn't hit the normal milestones that babies hit when they're supposed to hit them, and there were some things physically that I was still unable to do. And so I imagine that when they got the answer to that question, it gave them um, some relief, I imagine. So I've since used that label to understand who I am as a person and how to cope with this disability. And not just, okay, so the other thing is that labels help us understand each other. They don't just help individuals understand themselves. They help us understand each other. A very simple example of that would be, okay, so we have labels for everything. A table, a chair, a computer, and if everybody didn't sort of agree on what to call certain things, it would be very difficult for us to communicate. And so yeah, by that example, you can see that labels can facilitate communication on a very basic level. It's how language is labeling things. That's what language is. And the most important thing I want you to get from this discussion is that at whatever label I have, whether I have cerebral palsy, I have autism, I'm transgender, whatever label I have, I define that label. That label does not define me. So I hear from people all the time, Lex, why you gotta label yourself? Why you gotta let labels define you? And they don't get it. The label doesn't define me. I define the label. I mean, sure, there are criteria that must be met to meet a lot of labels that I have, but even still, that label doesn't dictate who I am. So just please be aware of that. Um, let's see, where was I going? Okay, and so to follow that up, we define ourselves all the time. And this is something that I've never understood. So people encourage me all the time not to focus on my labels, right? But we define ourselves all the time. Other people do. People are like, I'm an artist. I'm a doctor. And because those are either positive or neutral labels, people don't mind, attaching those to themselves. When people say don't define yourself, usually they're talking about what they perceive as a negative label. And what I want to say about that is that all of the labels that I have, I don't see them as negative. And so when I come to you and I tell you that I'm autistic, I get that your response is like, oh boy, why you got it? What? No, don't call yourself that. Don't focus on that, even if it's true. That might be because you see autism as a bad thing. I don't. So I just really want to point that out because I think it's important. Um, and this other thing is that if you know somebody who, identifies as something, I don't know, whether it's transgender, whether it's gay, whether it's autistic, whatever, and you say to them, something along the lines of, I don't see you. I don't pay attention to that label. I just see you as you. I understand that you think that you're being helpful. I understand you think you're being supportive. But depending on the person, and let me just say, for me personally, if you were to say that to me, you've basically just rejected a core part of who I am. I get that you were trying to be nice. I get that you were trying, and maybe it's not even. Maybe part of it is that you're maybe uncomfortable with the label, so you're trying to be like, nope, nope, I don't see that. That's not there. And even if you weren't trying to do that, at the very least, you have rejected something that I have told you is a part of me. Um, Imagine if you know, I you came to me and you told me something really important to you and really personal about who you are, and I was just like, no. Imagine if you came to me and you said, "Hey, Lex, I'm gay," and I was like, "Yeah, no, no, you're not. I don't. You're not gay. Don't see you as gay. You being gay does not matter in the slightest ever." Is essentially what you're saying. Now, I understand if you mean that you don't let that label completely inform all of your interactions with me. Like you don't treat me as someone who's less than because of that label. That I can appreciate. If that's what you mean, I appreciate that greatly. Thank you. Keep doing that. But the label does, depending on what it is, it might require that you do things a little bit differently with me. For instance, my friends who know that I'm autistic and understand what that means and are supportive of what that means, they know that there are certain things that they can do to make things easier for me at times, and they know that there are certain things that I do that they just have to sort of work with, and it's the same with them. Like I do that with them. Like my best friend, she knows I'm on the spectrum, and she knows that eye contact is difficult for me. So, by the way, that's a common trait of folks on the spectrum. So she doesn't constantly demand that I look at her when I'm talking to her because she understands that um, that's something that's difficult. So she's been very instrumental in helping me accept that part of who I am because she's accepted that part of who I am, and I can't thank her enough for that. Um, the other thing I will say is that I mentioned earlier that people label themselves things like artist and doctor and I don't know, trapeze dancer. I don't know what that is, but anyway, but I mean some of those labels can seem that they're not really as central to one's identity as some other ones, and so the more central to one's identity a label is, the more it can hurt when that label is rejected. I see being autistic as a very central part of my being, a very central part of my core. Um, so if you look at me and and I feel like you're rejecting that part of me, that hurts that much worse because it's so important to who I am. And the other thing is that there's a difference in, okay, how should I say this? There's an intersection between labels and privilege. And bear with me as I try to articulate what exactly I mean by that. So I'm I'm African American. You didn't see, maybe, I don't know, but now you know I'm African American, and that puts me in a minority category. That means that I don't have privilege in a lot of areas that other people have privilege in. So to sort of dismiss, and I hear this all the time related to race, to dismiss, racial identity as saying, yeah, Alex, I don't look at you as somebody, I don't look at you as a black person. You have effectively chosen to ignore everything that comes along with being black. and you've effectively chosen to deny that there are downsides that come along with me being black. Like, I would rather you try to understand what my experience of being African American is than look at me and say, well, it's not important that you're black. It is important. I get that, especially if you're not a minority of any sort, or you're not a minority in a lot of the ways that I am, I understand the tendency to want to dismiss that label, but I need you to understand that you, this is where privilege comes in, you have the privilege of dismissing that label. One, because it doesn't affect you, and two, because you might be one of the people who have or who are in a position to apply that label. So, I mean, for instance, if you're a doctor and you put a label on me that I then have to contend with for the rest of my life, and this happens so often in the field of mental health, it's easier for you to look at me and be like, well, that label's not important. Well, because you're the one who gave me the label, and you're the one in a position of power. So that's something else that I want you all to kind of consider. Next time you look at somebody and you tell them that it's not important that they're fill in the blank. It's not important that you're black. It's not important that you're autistic. It's not important to me that you're gay. It's not important to me that you're trans. It needs to be. It needs to be important. Because if you care about that person, you need to understand how those things impact their lives. And how you, as somebody who's in their life, can be a friend to them as those things impact their lives. So you need to understand those things instead of trying to pretend that they're not there because it makes you uncomfortable or because you just never had to think about it. Um, and I think that's all I wanted to say on that subject. But I'll just close by saying, so instead of rejecting people's labels or telling them not to label themselves, the two most important things you can do is one, respect their labels. If they came to you and they're telling you, I accept that label, this is my it's respect that and ask them why it's important to them and ask them what you can do to help them move better in the world as they embrace, because they're embracing who they are. When a person accepts or embraces a label, they're embracing who they are. You don't have to do it that way. You don't have to label yourself with a lot of the labels. If you don't want to, you can reject your labels. That's your right. But you don't have the right to tell someone that how they define themselves is not right because you don't agree with it or it makes you uncomfortable for whatever reason. So again, I will say this as many times as it needs to be said. Just be decent human beings to one another. Strive to understand instead of to dismiss. And that's really all that any one person can do. So yeah, I guess that I've said all that needs to be said on the subject. Um, everyone, have a good day, and I will see you back again soon. Peace.